Well, thank you guys for coming out. It's an honor to be here at Virginia Tech. I've never been to Virginia Tech before, so this is kind of exciting to be here. I've been working with Virginia Tech for a couple years, but remotely, and I'm very happy to be here with you today. My purpose today, hopefully, is to teach you not only about the regulatory changes that are affecting how you can comply with the terms of your J1 and J2 visa statuses, but also to give you some tools about how to use health insurance and health care in the United States. I mean, it can be a very scary moment when you're sick or hurt in a foreign country and you're not entirely sure what to do. So I'm hoping to give you those tools today. And a survey of, my IE Student Health is my consulting company. I'm also a full-time employee at Michigan State University, which in many ways is quite similar to Virginia Tech. And among Michigan State University students, not scholars, but students, excuse me, the incidence of somebody needing to see a doctor during any one year was 1 in 3. So about 33% of all the students needed to see a doctor. Now, scholars are on average a little bit older than students, so I would think that that's going to be a little bit higher. So even though nobody here is planning to get sick or hurt, it's going to happen to some of you, I'm sorry to say. And I want to make sure that you have the tools you need to be successful in that moment. So a little bit about me. So IE Student Health is a consulting company I started to try to help other colleges and universities with health insurance and health care in the United States. I'm very passionate about this. I think that, it's very tough to be in a foreign country and be sick or hurt, and I want to help as many people as I can with that. I'm also the Assistant Director for the Office of International Students and Scholars at Michigan State University. I have a master's degree in higher education student affairs from Indiana University, and my company's been working with Virginia Tech for the past 2 years. In fact, we just celebrated our 2-year anniversary. So those of you who may not be familiar with what IE Student Health does, there's 2 things that we do for Virginia Tech. We do health insurance recommendations. So there's a lot of stuff in the market. If you just Google International Scholar Health Insurance, there's a lot of stuff out there that's not too, it's quite frankly dangerous. We also do health insurance evaluations. So if you want to use a different policy, maybe from your home country, maybe from a different company other than the ones that we've recommended, we would evaluate it and say whether or not it's compliant with the J1 visa regulations and issue a compliance certificate. So those are the 2 services that we provide to Virginia Tech. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about the regulatory changes. We're going to talk about the importance of health insurance and why it's such a critical issue. We're going to talk about what happens if you're without insurance, just to give you a sense for the danger and why it's so critical. We're going to talk about the services that we have available, and we're going to talk about how to use health insurance and health care in the United States, how to use it effectively. So what's bringing us here today? It's a story about time management of the Department of State in a way, because the Department of State has been looking at changing these regulations for quite a long time. And they just recently finally changed it after saying for years and years and years that they were going to change these regulations. So it was back in September 2009 that the Department of State first said, hey, we're going to change these regulations. And there's a lot of the regulations that they changed that don't affect you a lot. They affect what we do as international education professionals, people who are running J1 visa programs, but they don't really have an effect on current and ongoing scholars. But there's a lot but the one thing is the health insurance that really affects you a lot. Finally, in October 2014, the rule was finally published. And then the new rules were effective on January 5th. However, the health insurance changes are going to be made effective May 15th. But it takes a while to change health insurance because, because it takes a long time, that's why they gave an extra amount of time to change the health insurance. To give you a sense for how long we were waiting, when they first proposed the changes to the health insurance regulations, this is what my daughter looked like. So this is my daughter in September of 2009, when a few days different from when the regulations were first proposed. This is what she looks like now. And she's got a brother. That's how long we were waiting for these changes. And all that time, the Department of State was saying, it's coming soon, it's coming soon. But it finally came through a few months ago, and now we're making those changes as quick as we can. So there's 3 critical changes to the health insurance regulations. One, the previous regulation was that the health insurance for J1 and J2 scholars had to cover $50,000 per condition. So that's if you slip on the ice and break your ankle, $50,000 for the broken ankle. If you then get a case of appendicitis, $50,000 for appendicitis. That's the thinking behind it. It's now doubled to $100,000. And honestly, if you can afford more coverage than $100,000, that's better, because $100,000 sounds like a lot of money, but in the context of American medical care, it can be gone very quickly, very quickly. I once had a student who was in his early 20s, diagnosed with cancer. It took $50,000 just to get his diagnosis. That was before treatment even started. So I hope that gives you a sense for how quickly a hospital could burn through $50,000 or $100,000. But if you have $100,000, you're following the rules. $10,000 for medical evacuation was the previous standard. It's now $50,000, or now it's going to be $50,000. Medical evacuation is in the event that you become very ill or very injured and you need to be returned to your home country for treatment by a special kind of ambulance plane. That's what medical evacuation would be. And this is the most depressing one to talk about, repatriation of remains in the event that you are to pass away while you are here in the United States. There now needs to be $25,000 available to return your remains to your home country for interment. So, I mean, obviously the last 2 are not frequently used, but it's important to have when the need arises. The $100,000 per condition, though, that's going to be the biggest one. All right, so now we're going to have a little bit of a quiz on healthcare costs. How much does a typical hospital room cost? A, B, C, or D? Any volunteers? C? You see? D, which is the equivalent of 5 iPads a day. And I'm not talking the iPads with the small memory. I'm talking the iPads with the 3G connectivity and a great big chunk of memory. Top shelf iPads. What's the minimum cost for an emergency room visit? Yeah? Ah, you're catching on. That's like 2 new, nice Kate Spade bags just for walking through the door. That's the base cost. You show up at the emergency room, it's at least $700. Everything else is on top of that. You know, you're going to have a charge for the doctor. If they take your blood, you're going to have a charge for blood work. There's a lot that goes into it. This is a real life emergency room scenario. That's me. That's my intern, Catherine. We had a very similar illness at about the same time. So just, at the very end of 2013, became very sick and we got dehydrated. This is, separate incidents, of course. And we just had to go to the hospital and get rehydrated. Just, an IV bag. That was it. Now, we didn't end up paying, this isn't you have insurance so it doesn't cost much. That's not what I'm getting at here. This was the cost before insurance. So this was the cost that was billed by the hospital. So mine was $2,000 and hers was $50. Why do you think that is? Any guesses?
Having insurance?
No. I have insurance. It's because she was in South Korea when it happened. The purpose of telling you this is to show you that the cost of the same medical care in the United States is wildly different than what it is in many other countries. It's wildly different from what you're probably used to in your home country in terms of medical costs. It's just wild, it's very high. So you can probably guess what the answer is here. What is the minimum cost to deliver a baby at a hospital in the US without insurance? Which is a lot of iPads. That's a lot of iPads. And I actually think the $10,000 is somewhat conservative. When I gave birth to that, you see Anna's little brother, the little boy there, Evan. I mean, it was over that, and I was very fortunate in that I had a very uncomplicated, simple delivery, and it was still like $11,500. It was a lot. All right, so the inconvenient truth is that medical care in the U.S. is very expensive. You cannot get full Medicaid coverage on a J1 or J2 visa, so there's no safety net for you. You're operating without a safety net. You have to make these preparations in advance. And you also have to do it in advance because there is, in the market that you're eligible for. So Americans have access to health insurance that will cover what's called a pre-existing condition. So if anybody has an ongoing medical issue, it's called pre-existing. The market that you're in still has restrictions on pre-existing conditions. So if you wait until you get sick and then try to buy insurance, you can't. Or they'll let you buy insurance, but they're not going to cover the thing you already have. They'll cover a new thing, but not the thing you already have, which is what you really need covered. So you can't wait until you get sick. You have to plan in advance for this. So it's a very important requirement, and there are two big reasons for this requirement. So two little guys. I thought that was a little cute picture with the fingers. So reason number one is without insurance, you're simply at risk. If you're sick or you're hurt, you can always go to the hospital emergency room and be stabilized. However, like I showed you, just for walking through the door, it's a huge, huge bill. Anywhere other than an emergency room doesn't necessarily have to see you. If you didn't have insurance or if you didn't have insurance information, they might say, you know what, you're going to have to go somewhere else. So you might not even get the care that you need when you need it if you don't have insurance. You may end up, like if you do have no insurance, you go to the emergency room, they'll treat you. You're going to end up with huge bills. And if you can't pay them, what then? And I mean, if you have a disaster relating to your health and it can really hurt your finances, it could pull the plug on your program. I've seen it happen before to people who either had no insurance on the F side because they legally can, or if they didn't have adequate insurance and they had huge medical bills they couldn't pay, what they were doing in the United States just has to stop, and they ended up having to go home. So it's key to your success, the success of your mission, whatever your mission was in coming here, whatever you came here to accomplish. You have to do this to make sure that you can accomplish that mission, that you're not at risk for having the plug pulled because of a health problem. And reason number two is without insurance, you're in violation of J visa status, and that's true for both J1 and J2. If you don't have health insurance, you're in violation. I've highlighted the critical piece, but then I'm going to highlight the critical part of the critical part, which is that you're subject to termination of your J1 visa status if you don't have insurance. And the Department of State takes this sort of violation very seriously. There are some violations that the Department of State will say, well, we'll record the violation, but you can keep going with your program, or, your status is going to be terminated, but you can apply to get it back through something called reinstatement. You can ask NICE and pay a big fee and a big application, and maybe you'll get it back. They say, don't even apply to get your status back if you do this. I mean, it's one of those kind of unforgivable sorts of violations. So it's a serious requirement. This cautionary tale is more about inadequate insurance or than the status violation. But we did have a student at Michigan State University. This is a different guy. He's a junior standing in good health, one of those people. I mean, nobody ever expects something that's going to go wrong with them, but I mean, especially like a 21-year-old guy who's had no health problems before, doesn't expect anything, but he had something really bad happen. And he had $100,000 in medical bills. And he had bought a really low-cost insurance, not really reading what it covered, and the insurance only covered $20,000 of that cost. $20,000. And you know what? That's perfectly legal. Like, I mean, it's wrong for that insurance company to sell insurance if that's really that inadequate. But it was perfectly legal. And he was supposed to pay $80,000, and so he withdrew from school and went home. He couldn't pay it, and he lost 3 years of his investment in his education here. So this is an example of why it can be so dangerous to have. I mean, even if you have insurance, if you don't have good insurance, you're still at risk. Here's another case study, pregnant without insurance. If somebody in the United States gets pregnant without insurance, remember how I said about a pre-existing condition? How if you buy new insurance, it's not going to cover a condition that you already have? If somebody is pregnant and then tries to buy insurance, there is nothing out there that will cover pregnancy. And so the options are paying out of pocket, $10,000 for normal hospital delivery. If it has to be a C-section, that's going to probably be about $30,000 to $40,000, if not more. There's, potentially you could pay out of pocket $4,000 or so for a midwife delivery at home, but then that comes with its own risks. If something happens and you need to go to the hospital anyway, you still, not only are you still needing to pay those hospital costs, but you also have the risk of the time that it takes to get to the hospital. What's going to happen on the trip? I mean, it's a kind of a risky move. Some people who have landed themselves in this position, I've seen just kind of do the math and say, you know what? If I go home, I'm going to get my health care taken care of for free. So why don't I just go home? It's going to cost me a lot less money. So that's sometimes an option too. But if you go back to let me go back to the requirements. No, I'm not going to go back that far. The regulations don't speak to maternity coverage. So you can have health insurance that meets the J1 requirements, the J1 and J2 requirements. You can have that insurance, be completely following the rules, and not have maternity coverage because it's not a specific requirement of the regulations. But if you are here, if you're a woman, if you are a man who is here with his wife, if something happens and you don't have that coverage, you're in a very, very difficult situation. So, I would encourage everybody to think about it, whether you're planning to have kids or not. Because, I probably have 6 to 10 couples per year. We have a pretty large population at MSU. 6 to 10 couples per year in my office with an unintended pregnancy. All right, it's part of life. Sometimes it happens. And, even if you're not planning on having a kid, I highly recommend you get this coverage. Don't gamble with your family's health and well-being. These kids here, those are my business partner, IE Student Health business partner. Those are her little kids. So let's go over your health insurance options here at Virginia Tech. So these have been developed in partnership with the ISSS office here. So you basically have, if you're not already employed by the university, your 3 choices are, you can purchase one of our recommended policies. Looking at our recommendations is free to you. The university pays for the subscription to those recommendations. So it's free to use that, and then you purchase that. And I also want to note that I am not a broker. So if you go on there and buy that insurance, I don't get any money from that. And that's on purpose. We want to make our recommendations based on quality alone. We have no financial connections to any health insurance companies. So whether 5 people buy that health insurance that we've recommended or 500 people buy that health insurance we recommended, we don't see any difference in what our company earns, and that's done on purpose. We want to remain as objective as possible. The central criteria for us making the recommendations that we do is whether or not it is good for you, whether or not it offers good protection to you, and we want to keep it that way. So those recommendations are objective recommendations made for you. The second option is to purchase an insurance policy from your home country that is valid in the United States. The third option is to purchase a non-recommended policy from another company in the United States. So if you decide that you don't want to use any of those, you can, Google it. Using a recommendation from a friend is always kind of a scary thing, because unless that friend has been in the hospital, they don't really know if it's good insurance. They know if it's cheap insurance. That's the only, ask if they've been to the hospital, and if they haven't, it's probably not a great recommendation. If you choose either the second or the third option, the way that the policy is set up is that you need to get a health insurance evaluation done by IE Student Health. So you purchase the insurance policy, and we evaluate it to make sure that it complies with all the necessary J-1 visa regulations. So how you go about getting the recommendations, the link is iestudenthealth.com/VT. Password you can get from the ISS office. You look at the site, and we've got it split up by, if you're here alone, if you're here with family members, the recommendations are different depending on the availability of certain policies. So you can check out, get it broken down that way. If you use a policy from your home country, there are pluses and minuses to that. The plus is that I've seen policies, plenty of home country issued policies, that offer fairly high levels of coverage for a lower premium than what you can get in the United States. So you can save some money, but the downside is that often, not always, but often these policies are done on a reimbursement basis. What that means is that there's no way for the company inside the for like a doctor or a hospital to send the bill to your insurance company abroad. And so what you're supposed to do is take the money out of your own pocket to pay the doctor and the hospital, and then apply to get your money back from the company later, which is probably fine if you have a $100 visit to an urgent care. You may be able to afford that until you can get it reimbursed. But if you have to go to the emergency room, if you have to go to the hospital, God forbid if you should need surgery, I don't think you're gonna have $10,000 sitting in your pocket waiting, that you can afford to give to the hospital and then wait for it to come back to you from the insurance company. So these can be very problematic. On paper the coverage is there, but in reality sometimes it doesn't materialize. Now again, you may be on paper complying with the J-1 visa regulations, so you're following the rules, but when actually something happens, you may not be able to actually use that coverage very well. So US-based non-recommended policy. So this is basically Googling International Scholar Health Insurance. I really don't recommend. That's because my estimate is that about 98% of what you're gonna find on Google is gonna be inadequate insurance, or maybe even downright a scam sometimes. Not only do you have the limitations on pre-existing conditions, but you have limitations on essential health benefits. So besides the major medical limits sometimes being a little low, you don't get preventative care, which, checkups, vaccines, maybe when you're on a temporary visit, maybe that's not so bad. The things that are really bad, though, are the ones down here at the bottom, the benefit caps, the time limits, the unreasonable exclusions. Benefit caps are things like they'll say, yes, we'll cover surgery, but only we'll limit you to $3,000 for surgery. There's no surgery that you can get in the United States for $3,000. There is no surgery you can get. Even the most simple kinds of surgeries, like the tonsil removal, the appendix removal, those sorts of things are always going to be about like $8,000 at least. And so when you have it capped at $3,000, that's just saying we just don't really want to pay for it. That's basically what the company is saying. The time limits, they'll say, we'll pay for something, but only if it lasts 13 weeks or less. If it lasts any more than 13 weeks, you're on your own. I've even seen it as low as 60 days, which makes me very uncomfortable. So if you have some sort of ongoing thing, they're just not going to pay for it. Or the unreasonable exclusions are some of the most ridiculous. They're like, we're going to give you health insurance, but if you get cancer, we're not going to cover you. How can a health insurance not cover cancer? Or they'll say, if it has to do with your heart or your brain, forget it. They're just not going to cover any condition with you. I mean, it's health insurance. It's supposed to cover that. That's its whole job. So, I mean, those exclusions are, I mean, these are the things that, whoops. Those are the things that make me very upset about the market, and because these insurance companies know that people aren't reading the fine print. They know that the government hasn't regulated this area of the market, so that nobody's protecting you, and they're taking advantage of you. And that's why, you know, we want to look and have quality recommendations available to you, because nothing on our list has these types of problems. So if we are not recommending it, there's a reason we're not recommending it. There's a reason we're not recommending it. There's something up with it. So the health insurance evaluation process, you purchase the health insurance plan of your choice. You get our password from the ISS office. You pay the $20 evaluation fee, and you mail your policy documents as an email attachment to the VT Eval email address. So what's changing about our services? First, the health insurance recommendations. We're seeing some fluctuations. The reason is that the market is slow to adjust to these changes. And we were down a few recommendations. We try to have, our goal is to have 5 recommendations out for each of the lists. We're not always able to find 5 quality policies in the market that are compliant with J-1 visa regulations. Because the market is also set up for the F1 student visa, which doesn't have these rules. And so there's a lot out there that works for F1s that doesn't work for J1s. And so you're already kind of like reducing the pool a little bit. And then to find the quality ones in the J1 pool, it's kind of hard sometimes. And when the rules changed, we found that we're already making recommendations according to the new rules. Because we can't wait until May 15th to make recommendation changes. Because if we wait until May 15th, then a scholar arriving on May 1st is going to buy a policy that's compliant with the old rules, and then in 2 weeks they're in violation of their status for not having adequate insurance. So we've already got policies that are compliant up there. So we're down a few. Right now we've got 4 up for single scholars and 2 up for scholars with families. That number will grow as more companies start offering more plans that are compliant with the new regulations. So it's going to go up from there. And we should be back to full strength on the list by summer. With the health insurance evaluations, we started doing the health insurance evaluations based on the new regulations starting January 1st. Now here's the part that's probably going to be of interest to a lot of you in this room, reevaluations. So for those of you who have a DS 2019 that is expiring after May 15th, if you got a health insurance evaluation from IE Student Health, you're going to need to do a reevaluation. And we're going to offer those reevaluations at half price, so $10. And so that's up now. If you go to our website, you can go and you can find the link to pay the $10 fee. You can mail your policy documents into us again, and we will reevaluate them for the new regulations and issue you a new compliance certificate that will cover you for your program that is going into after May 15th to comply with the new regulations. All right. Understanding your health insurance. So whether you have the university health insurance, one of the recommended policies, or a company in the US, this is how, if you have something from your home country, it's probably going to be, like I said, out of your pocket and getting a reimbursement. But if you have a US-based health insurance policy, The next slides are going to teach you more about how to work with that policy. So in the most basic, we're zooming out to 30,000 feet, the most basic terms, this is how health insurance works. You purchase health insurance, you get an insurance card from your insurance company, and then when you need to have medical care, so when you go to the doctor or the hospital, you show that card to the doctor or the hospital. On the card is billing information. So the reason they want to see that card so badly is because it gives them your policy number, your name, and and on the back it has an address for where they can send the bill. That's what they really, really want, is where to send the bill. So this is, it's critical to have your card on you. So in terms of the payments, you incur medical costs. Depending on the type of service you have, sometimes there's a fixed copay. So the copay, is usually things like a basic office visit to the doctor. They'll say whether the doctor charges $75 or $100 or $125, you're going to pay this set amount. Sometimes it's $10, $15, $20, $25. That's your copay. If there's not a copay for that particular service, you're going to pay the deductible plus the coinsurance. I know I'm throwing all these terms out. We're going to get into more depth into what this is. So the deductible, kind of think of it like a bucket. I couldn't sort out how to make an empty bucket up here. So just imagine this is the bottom of the bucket. So as you incur medical costs in a given year, the first costs that are incurred are the deductible, and that's the part that you pay. So whatever your deductible is, whether it's $25, $100, $250, $500 is the highest you can have and be in compliance with J1 regulations. That's how much you pay. So if you don't have, if your costs are lower than the deductible, then you're going to pay out of pocket for those costs. Once you've met the deductible, so once you've paid the first $25 or $100 of your costs in that year, then your coverage kicks in. And so it's either going to be the copay is what you pay, plus the portion that's above the copay is what your insurance company pays. Or usually there's a set percentage for coinsurance, which is they'll say we're going to cover 80%, you're going to cover 20%, we're going to cover 90%, you're going to cover 10%, whatever the case may be. So that's how they kind of split up the costs and try to, they're trying to kind of share the cost with you. And basically, the higher the coinsurance, the higher the coinsurance and the higher deductible, the cheaper your insurance is going to get, because the more that they know you're going to pay if you have medical care. So, I mean, if you have a really high deductible, you're going to have a cheaper health insurance, but if you actually have to go into the hospital, you're going to pay a lot more for those medical costs. So you just have to know that the higher your deductible is, the bigger the gamble that you're taking. So here are some examples. On the left, policy A, this is, I mean, if you've seen the policy documents, they're like this long, right? So this is like a very distilled down, simple version of a policy document. Let's say the policy has a $20 office visit copay. So that's for a basic visit to a regular doctor or urgent care. $250 emergency room copay. Typically there's higher copays for emergency rooms just because they're trying to get people to not go there. $150 deductible, so that's the first $150, and then 10% coinsurance after that. So we're going to talk more later about what the urgent care is if you're not familiar with urgent care, but just think of it like a regular doctor visit. So I've done 3 different visits. So let's say the same person has to go to the urgent care 3 times. I've done 3 because with this policy construction, all 3 are going to be a different price. So let's say that the cost is $125 to go to the urgent care. The first time you go to urgent care, you're going to end up paying $125 because the deductible is $150. So the cost is lower than the deductible, so you end up paying the $125. That doesn't mean that you don't show your insurance card. Even though you have to pay for it, you show your insurance card, because otherwise the insurance company is not going to know that you paid the deductible. And then the next time you go for medical care, they're going to say, oh, hey, you didn't pay the deductible. Because if you don't show the card, they're not going to, nobody's going to tell them. So then the next time they go to the urgent care, it's another $125. So they had, with the $150 deductible, they were only $25 short of meeting their deductible. So $25 goes towards meeting the deductible, and then the $150 deductible is met. Then there's a $20 copay, so the total cost is going to be $45. The third time they go, the deductible is totally met, so it's only so it's just a $20 copay. Questions about that? Yeah.
What about the co-insurance?
The co-insurance? Yeah. If the service has a set copay amount. I'm going to do scenarios that have co-insurance next. Okay. But usually office visits have a fixed copay. And so it's not a percentage like co-insurance. So there's not a lot of those. Office visit is by far the most common. But if there's a set copay, then that's what you pay once the deductible is met. All right. So let's say somebody goes to the emergency room and they end up having to have their appendix removed. Costs $6,000. That's it's probably going to be a little higher. So it would be a $150 deductible plus $250 emergency room copay plus 10% of the remaining, and that calculation is going to be $25 off. But I hope that gives you the idea that you pay the deductible, and then if it's the type of thing that has a copay, you pay that. If it's the type of thing that has co-insurance, which is most other things other than office visits and ER visits, you pay the co-insurance after the deductible. Now I put there that the deductible has not been met. So that's assuming that this person that we're talking about here, that they didn't have those three urgent care visits. Because if you went to the urgent care and you met the deductible there, then you don't have to pay the deductible at the hospital. So I'm assuming that the deductible has not been met, and this is the only medical care this person has had this year. This is the first medical care they're having this year. If that person did already go to the urgent care and did already pay that $150 deductible, then they don't have to pay the deductible again, and they just pay the copay plus the co-insurance after that. Are we doing okay? Are you guys with me? This is no fun. I mean, this is... All right, one more. Delivery of baby, $14,000. Assuming the deductible has not been met. So you pay the deductible plus, because this is not an ER sort of thing. When you deliver a baby, sometimes it goes through the ER, but usually you're going just right to the maternity ward. It's not an ER visit. So there's no ER copay. It's just the deductible plus the remaining 10%, assuming that there's not been any other medical care and the deductible hasn't been met. Alternatively, if the deductible has been met, then it's just a straight 10%. Doing okay? Yes, it is possible. Depending on the construction of your insurance policy, you could end up, if you have something really bad happen, you could end up owing several $1,000s even with insurance. That's one reason that I try to find as many policies as I can that have something called an out-of-pocket maximum, which I'm not even going to get into the math of that, but basically it caps your costs. So for example, the one that I probably like the best on our recommendation list right now, it's called Trailblazer, it's new, has a $2,000 out-of-pocket cost. So that means that worst case scenario, you have something really big and bad and expensive happen, the most you'll pay is $2,000. All right, are you guys ready to try this? All right, I'm gonna have you guys try this. To split this up, I'm gonna have these two end groups, so you guys and you guys over here. I want you to do the exercise, the calculations that look like this. I want you to do it based on the idea that the deductible has been met. And I want you guys to do this based on the idea that the deductible has not been met. Does that make sense?
We have the deductible covered or not?
You know what? I'm getting a sense that maybe that's too much. Let's do this based on the idea that the deductible has not been met. That everybody has to pay the deductible. This is the first medical care that you're getting. Okay? All right, let's just do it that way. All right, any questions about this exercise?
I still have one question with the co-insurance.
All right, we'll get back together in like 5 minutes. We're going to bring it back together and see what you came up with. I'm going to be looking for some bold volunteers to give their answers. Who's going to be, huh? Yeah. Let's see who's brave enough to offer their answers. All right, so if this person is going to the urgent care for the first time, what are they going to pay? Yeah? Yep, $125 towards the deductible, because as you notice, this new policy construction, it's got a lower copay on the office visit and a lower coinsurance, but it's got higher ER copay and higher deductible. So the deductible is up at $300. So the first time they go to the urgent care, they're still going to pay the full cost of that visit to the urgent care. How about the second one? Yeah. So now they've paid $250 towards the deductible. So as you can see, the deductible really makes a difference. Really makes a difference. Urgent care visit number 3. Did you get 65? So the remaining $50 towards the deductible plus the $15 copay. $65.
There's nothing else due to the coinsurance?
No, usually, and again, there's various policy constructions. The gentleman over there just told me about one where you paid the copay and the coinsurance, which I think I've seen it before, but it's rare. Usually the copay is just you pay just that. But in most cases, you're going to pay just the copay and not the remaining coinsurance. Whoops. How about the appendectomy? Somebody raise their hand and tell me an answer.
500.
500? 870. So $300 ER copay, $300 deductible. Oh, and I just said the deductible. Oh, yeah.
That means that you pay the copay and also the coinsurance. That's what it happens usually.
Yeah. All right, maybe I was wrong about that. Well, okay.
But the deductible is already.
Usually the ER visits are handled. I've seen this happen on ER more often than the office visit. So I'm sorry about the incongruity. Yeah. Usually the office visits are the flat fees. The ER can sometimes do that more. Apologies for that.
But shouldn't be the deductible already met when it's all in one year?
The copay and this is presuming that, like, this is isolated by itself. So, I mean, it would be definitely different if this was all the same person in 1 year. But if it was, if it was just the appendectomy without this, then the deductible would have to be paid. If they had already met the deductible, then the deductible is not there. It is complicated. How about the delivery of a baby? Is that more or less what you got? That was a little simpler without the ER. It is hard to predict. I'm sorry?
So the last case is also isolated from the first 3 cases, right? Because we have
Yeah, the last case is also isolated. So if the person had not met the deductible already, then they would just pay a flat 5%. Yeah. It is difficult to predict your medical costs. The point is that the lower your deductible, the lower your co-insurance, the less you're going to pay when it comes down to it. So when you're shopping for insurance, don't just shop on price. You want to look at your co-pays, look at your deductible, look at your co-insurance, and you want to try to get those low. The lower that they are, that you can afford, as low as you can afford them to be, because then when you have medical costs incurred, it's easy for it to get up there. Okay? All right. What's not typically covered by health insurance? This is typical for the United States. Typically, health insurance does not include vision and dental. Now, those of you who are VT employees may get vision and dental. Yeah. If you're not a VT employee and you buy health insurance, you're not going to be covered for vision and dental. Now, if you have an injury to your eye or an injury to your mouth involving your teeth, those injuries will be covered as health insurance. But as far as evaluating your eyes for like your glasses prescription, that's not typically covered. Regular dental cleanings and x-rays, that's not going to be covered. Even things like root canals and crowns and, dental things like that. Better to get it in your home country, if possible. I'm not even, sometimes you can get a discount plan in the United States, but typically it's not possible to buy private insurance for these things. That's actually worth the cost. All right, I'm going to talk about some more practical matters. I've been working with international students and scholars in terms of health insurance for a lot of years, and I've noticed 3 common mistakes that people from other countries who come to the United States tend to make in terms of health care. I'm going to tell you about those 3 common mistakes in the hopes that you won't make them. The first common mistake is going to the emergency room instead of an urgent care or a regular doctor clinic. I've seen this time and time again. In fact, just earlier this week, I was talking with a student who had ear pain for two days, and he came in to ask about his health insurance, and I said, oh, you can go to here's the clinic, and he's like, I'm just going to go to the hospital. I'm like, no, just for an ear infection, you don't go to the hospital. In the United States, it has to be a pretty high-level problem for you to go to the emergency room. So I've got a few examples here. The things that you want to go to either a regular doctor or an urgent care for are things like colds, coughs, sore throat, flu, fever. You've got a small cut that, where the bleeding is relatively controlled. If you sprain your ankle or your wrist, you've got a rash on your skin, or like this guy earlier this week, if you have an ear infection. Those are the things you don't go to the hospital for those things. If it's a major emergency, so like a head injury, trouble breathing, loss of consciousness, bleeding that doesn't come under control with covering it and pressing on it, those are the things you go to the emergency room for. If you're ever in a life-threatening situation, you dial 911 from any phone. An ambulance will be sent there. That has to be a super high-level thing. Most people who come to the United States, in most places around the world, this is what the progression looks like. If you can't go to the regular doctor or hospital, you can just go to the hospital and they'll take care of you and it's fine. Is that fairly accurate? Is that more or less what you come? I've got one guy saying yes. Is that more or less what you do at home? All right. So, this is a big point of emphasis. And then in the United States, there's this thing in between the doctor and the clinic and the hospital called urgent care. And urgent care fills a specific need, because with the regular doctor or clinic, their hours are not always as convenient. They can't always, even if you can catch them when they're open, they usually are running by appointment, and maybe they don't have an appointment available that day, and you can't get in. Urgent care, nobody gets appointments, nobody needs an appointment. You just show up. And usually they'll see you within about an hour. And if you buy the recommended policies from IU Student Health, we list what the covered urgent cares are. So we list the covered urgent cares and the covered hospitals, because we know that those are the 2 kind of critical needs. So If it's a minor injury or illness, this is why you don't go to the hospital. If you go there with something minor, you're going to wait a very long time because they don't treat according to the order that people arrive. They treat according to the severity of the illness or injury. And so if other people come in after you with a more severe condition, they're going to treat them first and let you wait. The second thing is the cost is high. It's the most, so our healthcare system is the most expensive in the world. And within our system, emergency room care is the most expensive care you can get in the most expensive healthcare system in the world. Like I said, $700 just for walking through the door. So that's, I mean, the cost is pretty high. Usually at the urgent care, it's $1 to $150. You wait usually an hour or less. And if you go there and it turns out, you know, actually this is more severe than you thought, you should go to the hospital, they can refer you to the hospital. This has happened to me once and my son once. And so we went there, and when we ended up getting to the hospital, we didn't have to wait. They got us back pretty quickly because the urgent care had called ahead and sent over the records, and they were ready for us. I mean, it worked out pretty nicely. Mistake number 2, avoiding health care as much as possible. So sometimes people have heard from friends about how horribly expensive it is in the United States to get medical care. And so when they are sick, they prefer to drink a lot of water, take some Tylenol, and stay home and just kind of wait it out, which may work in some cases, but not always. I've even heard a story of somebody who passed out, woke up in the hospital, was scared of the bill, and snuck out of the hospital because they were so scared of the bill. Your health is fragile. It's something that once it's gone, it's hard to get back. Money will come and go in your life, but your health is highly critical. You don't want to risk your health over money. If you need health care, get it. Get what you need. The number 3 mistake is not managing medical bills. When you go to the hospital, you could have up to 5 bills. So in most places in the world, you go to the hospital, you have one hospital bill, which makes total sense. Sadly, that is not how it works in the United States. You will get a bill from the hospital for use of their facilities, a bill from the doctor for their consultation and treatment. If you have x-rays or MRIs or CAT scans, you could have radiology bill. If you have blood work done, you could have a laboratory bill. And if you took an ambulance to go to the hospital, there's a bill for that too. So it can be kind of a mess. And it can be very confusing as well. The explanation of benefits is really important. So in addition to getting all these bills in the mail, you're also going to get things in the mail that look like bills, but it'll say at the top, this is not a bill. In fact, instead of explanation of benefits, my husband and I call them, this is not a bill. Oh, you got another this is not a bill in the mail today. The explanation of benefits is how you understand what is happening with your health insurance. So the purpose of the explanation of benefits is to say, hi, you used our health insurance recently. We paid this amount to your healthcare provider. We didn't pay this amount, and here's why we didn't. And they'll say, it's because this is the copay. It's because this is the deductible. It's because this is the coinsurance, or whatever the case may be. They'll give you a reason for whatever they don't cover. Sometimes it's just for your information, so you know, okay, I've met the deductible now. Great. Now, next time it's going to be a little bit less if I need to go to the doctor. Sometimes they make mistakes. Sometimes they, I've seen situations where they think that, you might have been in a car accident, and so they want to try to get the other person's car insurance to pay for it, but there wasn't actually a car accident. It was like a bike thing. And so, sometimes you have to watch and make sure that your health insurance is being administered properly. If you don't understand your explanation of benefits, or if you think that there has been a mistake made with your health insurance, you should call your insurance company and ask. I understand that talking on the phone in a foreign language is one of the worst things. It is one of the worst things. It's very difficult. Some companies, especially companies who market to international students and scholars, will offer translation services. Ask for that. If you need to talk to them on the phone and you're not comfortable doing it in English, ask to see if they can offer phone translation services for you to make the process easier. Especially with all this technical vocabulary, it can be tough. It can be really tough. All right, one last quiz. True or false? When you have insurance, you don't have to pay anything. False. Co-pay deductible insurance. Co-insurance. True or false? You pay the same price going to the urgent care or the emergency room. False. Big difference. This is the progression you want to follow. So doctor or clinic first, then consider urgent care, then consider emergency room if it's really high level. If you are not sure, I want to give you some recommendations for how, if you're feeling sick or you've gotten hurt and you're not sure if it's serious enough for the ER, you're not sure where you should go. If you have been to a doctor before, sometimes you can call that doctor for advice. If it's a serious enough thing, sometimes you can have that doctor called in the middle of the night if it's really urgent. Also, some insurance companies have a nurse line service. This is one of those things that you kind of have to either dig through all those papers to find or call the insurance company and ask them, do you have a nurse line? If they have it, it's a fantastic service because you can call the nurse and the nurse can tell you how bad it is. Is it bad enough that you need to go to the emergency room at 2 in the morning? Or can you wait through the night and go to the urgent care when it opens in the morning? So if you're not aware, I recommend you look into that. True or false, you should bring your insurance card anytime you visit a doctor or hospital. True. You should carry it with you all the time. Raise your hand if you have your insurance card with you right now. Hooray! Those of you who aren't raising your hands, put your insurance card in your wallet the next time you're home. Carry it with you all the time. You really never know when you might need it. I brought mine here with me to Virginia Tech. I don't know if I'm going to eat something weird on the airplane and have a problem. You just never know. You need to carry it with you all the time, all the time. But if for whatever reason you forget and you don't have it with you and you really need to seek medical care, go anyway. You can sort it out later. But I've seen people who don't have their insurance card just avoid the doctor because they think they're not going to get in the door. If it's really bad, you can always go to the emergency room regardless. But, you should get the care you need when you need it. So review, tips for success. Buy a policy with decent coverage. And here's a hint, it's probably not the cheapest policy. You don't have to buy necessarily the most expensive policy either. But if you buy the cheapest policy, you can expect that you're probably going to pay a lot when the time comes. Learn the company's network providers. If your company uses a network, you should know where it is that they offer the best coverage. If you buy an IE Student Health recommended policy, we already list the nearest urgent cares and hospitals. If you use a different policy, you're going to need to look and see which ones are covered in your area. Something that we didn't talk about is the primary care provider. I don't think that this is common in your area, but sometimes, especially for Virginia Tech employees, probably I think, that you may need to establish a primary care provider, so a primary doctor you would see. I don't think if you're not a VT employee, you're probably not going to have this, but for VT employees, you should. Always carry your card, and if you incur medical bills, don't ignore them. Ask questions if you don't understand. Always ask if you don't understand. This is my email, brooke@iestudenthealth.com. I'm going to open it up for Q&A now. If you have questions, raise your hand, please. Okay, there in the back. If we could keep it quiet during questions, that would be helpful. Thank you. You said you are or are not an employee?
I am, and I have been here since I arrived.
Okay, so her question is, she's a Virginia Tech employee, she's had health insurance since she arrived. Does she need to do anything in terms of the evaluation? And the answer is no. So if you're an employee, you don't have to get these health insurance evaluations. However, as Ian mentioned earlier, you do have to get a rider for medical evacuation and repatriation coverage, and you have to make sure that that rider covers the new policy requirements. If you bought a lower coverage before, you may have to up it. Is that correct, Ian?
Yep.
Yeah, so that, I'm sorry? Medical evacuation and repatriation.
She already has riders for that now, because the Virginia Tech policy doesn't cover that. So it was 15,000 before, and it's moved to 50, is that right?
Medical evacuation was 10,000 before. It's moving up to 50. Repatriation of remains was 7,500. Now it's 25,000.
Any other questions for Brooke? All right. Thank you, Brooke.
Thank you very much for your time.
Presentation. Yeah, big round of applause. We were so fortunate to have Brooke with us today. She has an enormous wealth of knowledge regarding international students and scholars and health insurance.